The call that destroyed Brendan Fowler's life started with nothing more than a cup of coffee. At 7:18 a.m., the Sunrise Diner sat quietly beside Route 41, just outside the city limits. Truck drivers filled most of the booths. Waitresses carried steaming coffee pots between tables. A radio behind the counter played old country songs. Nothing looked unusual. Nothing looked dangerous. And yet, inside booth number 7, two men were sitting at the center of one of the largest federal investigations in the state. Neither looked like police officers. That was the point. Detective Ethan Mercer wore a faded black hoodie, ripped jeans, and work boots stained with engine grease. Across from him sat Detective Logan Pierce, whose shaved head, beard, and tattoo-covered forearms made him look more like an ex-convict than a law enforcement officer. For 5 months, they had spent nearly every waking hour becoming someone else. 5 months of lies, 5 months of fake identities, 5 months of earning the trust of men who would kill them without hesitation if they discovered the truth. The operation was called Operation Ironclad. Officially, only 14 people knew it existed. Unofficially, it had become one of the most expensive undercover investigations in the region. Its target was a weapons trafficker named Victor Kane. Kane wasn't the type of criminal who appeared on television. He didn't post pictures online. He didn't seek attention. He operated in shadows. And because of that, federal agents believed he had supplied military-grade weapons to criminal organizations in 6 different states. Every failed arrest led back to him. Every intercepted shipment pointed toward him. Every witness either disappeared or refused to testify. For years, Kane had remained untouchable, until Ethan Mercer and Logan Pierce found a way inside. 5 months earlier, they had entered Kane's organization posing as black market transport specialists. Men willing to move anything for the right price. Weapons, cash, stolen goods, no questions asked. Slowly, they earned trust, then access, then responsibility. Now they stood closer to Kane than any law enforcement officer had ever managed. One more successful transaction, one more meeting, one more shipment. That was all they needed. Then the entire network would collapse. At least, that was the plan. Ethan glanced at his watch, 7:19 a.m. "He'll be here soon." Logan nodded. "You nervous?" Ethan laughed quietly. "Only every second of every day." Logan smirked. "Good. Means you're still thinking." The waitress arrived. "Need anything else, gentlemen?" "No, ma'am." She smiled and walked away. Neither detective touched the food sitting in front of them. Their attention remained fixed on the parking lot outside. Because someone important was supposed to drive by. Not stop, not enter, just drive by. A simple visual confirmation. Nothing more. The operation had reached the point where even a handshake carried risk. The less contact, the better. Outside, morning traffic flowed steadily. Everything remained normal. Until the diner door opened, and Brendan Fowler walked inside. 23 years old, 8 months out of the academy, still carrying the confidence that often comes with knowing just enough to be dangerous. Officer Fowler had dreamed of becoming a police officer since childhood. His father had worn a badge. His grandfather had worn one too. To Brendan, law enforcement wasn't a profession. It was an identity. Unfortunately, experience hadn't caught up with confidence yet, and that combination could be explosive. The moment he entered the diner, his eyes started scanning. Habit, training, or at least what he believed was training. He noticed truck drivers, families, construction workers. Then his attention stopped. Booth 7, Ethan, Logan. Something about them immediately triggered suspicion. The clothing, the tattoos, the hardened expressions, The way they constantly watch the windows. The way they barely touch their food. Brendan slowed. His instincts began constructing a story. Two criminals, possibly gang-affiliated, possibly planning something, possibly dangerous. The problem wasn't that he noticed them. Good officers notice things. The problem was that he had already decided what they were before learning a single fact. And once that assumption formed, everything he saw seemed to confirm it. Logan noticed him first. Without moving his head, without changing expression, years undercover had taught him to detect attention instantly. 3 o'clock. Ethan took a sip of coffee. I see him. Local patrol. Yep. For a moment, neither man seemed concerned. That happened occasionally. Uniformed officers walked into restaurants every day. Usually they ordered breakfast and left. Unfortunately, Brendan Fowler had different plans. He walked directly toward their booth. His posture already aggressive, his jaw clenched, his hand resting near his duty belt. Logan sighed internally. Not good. Very not good. The officer stopped beside the table. Neither detective looked up immediately, a deliberate choice, because acknowledging him too quickly might attract attention. Unfortunately, Brendan interpreted it differently, as disrespect. Mornin', Ethan finally looked up. Mornin'. Brendan remained standing, waiting. Neither detective said anything else. The silence irritated him instantly. What are you guys doing here? Ethan blinked. What do you mean? I mean, what are you doing here? Logan exchanged a glance with Ethan. The question made no sense. People came to diners to eat. Yet Brendan spoke as though he had discovered them inside a bank vault. We're having breakfast. The answer should have ended the conversation. Instead, it made Brendan more suspicious. His eyes narrowed. You from around here? Ethan shrugged. Sometimes. Wrong answer. At least in Brendan's mind. The officer folded his arms. What kind of work do you do? Logan answered this time. Construction. Another lie. Another necessary lie. Another answer designed to preserve 5 months of undercover work. But Brendan didn't know that. To him, it sounded evasive. Everything sounded evasive. Every word increased his certainty that he had found criminals. And certainty is dangerous when it's based on assumptions. The officer leaned closer. Construction where? Logan's patience began slipping. Why? The question landed badly. Very badly. Brendan interpreted it as resistance, defiance, challenge. Exactly the reaction his academy instructors had warned against. Except this wasn't the academy, and these weren't criminals. But Brendan couldn't see that, because by now he wasn't gathering information. He was searching for confirmation. Every answer became proof. Every hesitation became evidence. Every glance became suspicious. The detectives realized the situation was beginning to deteriorate. Fast. Ethan offered a calm smile. Officer, is there a problem? There might be. That answer immediately raised alarms. Both detectives felt it. Because undercover officers develop instincts, and those instincts were screaming now. Something was wrong. Brendan should have walked away 10 minutes ago. Instead, he remained, growing more confrontational by the second. You carrying identification? Ethan almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he kept his expression neutral. Am I being detained? Brendan's face hardened. There it was, the question. The one that always seemed to escalate situations. Not because it was illegal, because it challenged authority. And Brendan wasn't mature enough yet to separate authority from ego. What did you say? I asked if I'm being detained. The diner suddenly felt quieter. Several customers looked over. The waitress stopped moving. Logan felt his stomach tighten. Attention was the last thing they needed. Brendan stepped even closer. You don't ask questions. I ask questions. Ethan immediately recognized the danger. The officer was emotional now, no longer thinking clearly. And emotional officers are unpredictable, particularly inexperienced ones. Across the parking lot, a black SUV appeared. Neither detective reacted outwardly, but internally, both noticed immediately. The vehicle mattered, a lot, because it belonged to someone connected to Victor Kane's organization, someone expected to verify their presence, someone who absolutely could not see a police confrontation. The SUV continued approaching. Brendan never noticed. He remained focused entirely on proving himself right. And in doing so, he was seconds away from destroying everything. The black SUV rolled slowly past the diner. Inside sat Derek Cole. Most people would have mistaken him for an ordinary businessman. Clean haircut, expensive watch, pressed shirt, nothing remarkable. That was exactly why Victor Kane trusted him. Derek wasn't muscle. He wasn't a shooter. He wasn't an enforcer. He was the man who verified information before millions of dollars changed hands. And this morning, his job was simple. Drive past the diner. Confirm Ethan Mercer and Logan Pierce were where they claimed to be. Leave. 30 seconds, maybe less. The kind of task nobody would even remember afterward, unless something went wrong. And something was already going wrong. Inside the diner, Brendan Fowler's voice had become noticeably louder. Customers were openly staring now. The waitress had stopped pretending not to watch. Even the cook behind the counter had turned around. Every instinct Ethan possessed was screaming the same warning. End this. Now. But ending it wasn't easy, because revealing their identities would destroy 5 months of undercover work, and keeping their identities secret might destroy it anyway. Brendan took another step toward the booth. Let me see your IDs. Ethan stayed calm. We haven't committed a crime. You don't decide that. The answer came instantly, too emotionally. Logan could practically see the officer spiraling. Every word was becoming personal, and personal was dangerous. Outside, the SUV slowed. Derek Cole glanced toward the window. His eyes narrowed. A uniformed police officer, standing over Ethan and Logan, talking aggressively, not leaving, not smiling, not acting casually, just standing there, watching them, questioning them. Derek's instincts immediately activated, because men in his line of work survived by recognizing problems before everyone else. And this looked like a problem, a very big one. Inside the diner, Brendan pointed toward the door. Both of you stand up. Ethan felt his pulse increase, not from fear, from calculation. Every possible outcome was bad. Stand up, the confrontation escalates. Refuse, the confrontation escalates faster. Reveal identities, Operation Ironclad dies immediately. Logan looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. 5 months undercover had created a language beyond words, and both understood exactly what the other was thinking. Then Brendan made his biggest mistake. He reached for his radio. 82 dispatch. The detectives froze. No, not the radio. Anything but the radio. Dispatch answered immediately. Go ahead, 82. Brendan kept staring at the detectives. I've got 2 suspicious subjects refusing cooperation. The entire diner became silent. Even the customers could sense the tension now. Ethan felt his stomach drop. This wasn't normal police work anymore. This was ego. Pure ego. Dispatch responded. Need assistance? That should have been the off-ramp. The moment to de-escalate. The moment to say no. The moment to walk away. Instead, Brendan doubled down. Affirmative. Logan closed his eyes briefly. No, no, no. Brendan pressed the transmit button again. Requesting code 3 response. The words hit like a gunshot. For a second, nobody moved. Then Ethan slowly looked out the window. The SUV was still there, still watching, still observing everything. And Code 3 meant one thing: multiple patrol units, lights, sirens, chaos. The exact opposite of undercover work. Outside, Derek Cole immediately reached for his phone. He wasn't panicking. People like Derek never panicked. They analyzed. And what he was seeing looked very bad. Very, very bad. He watched the officer speaking into his radio, then watched Ethan and Logan, then watched several customers staring. A simple conclusion formed in his mind. Police contact. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. But Victor Kane didn't pay him to take chances. Derek started the engine. Inside the diner, Ethan saw the brake lights illuminate. His heart sank. The SUV began moving, slowly at first, then faster. Then it disappeared onto the highway. Gone. Just like that. 5 months. Gone. Logan watched it disappear too. Neither detective needed to say anything. Both knew exactly what had happened. The verification had failed. The chain of trust had been broken. And somewhere within the next hour, Victor Kane would hear about it. Brendan remained completely unaware. In his mind, he was winning. The suspects looked uncomfortable. Backup was coming. Control was established. Everything was unfolding exactly as he imagined. The reality couldn't have been more different. 3 minutes later, the first sirens became audible, distant, then closer, then much closer. Several customers stood and left. Nobody wanted to be near whatever was about to happen. The waitress disappeared into the kitchen. Only Brendan seemed energized, like he was finally becoming the hero of his own story. Ethan made one final attempt. "Officer." "What?" "Think carefully about what you're doing." Brendan laughed. The wrong response. The absolute wrong response. "You threatening me?" Ethan stared at him. The man genuinely believed that. Every warning sounded like a threat. Every explanation sounded like resistance. Every disagreement sounded like guilt. The officer leaned forward. "Stand up." Neither detective moved. Brendan's face reddened. "I said stand up." Still nothing. Then it happened. The moment that would eventually appear in every federal courtroom, every news report, every indictment. Brendan grabbed Ethan's hoodie, hard. The movement happened in less than a second. Years of training immediately took over. Before Ethan consciously processed what was happening, his hand moved. He caught Brendan's wrist, stopped the grab instantly. Not aggressively, not violently, just enough to stop the contact. But to Brendan, it felt like an attack. His eyes widened. For one dangerous second, his hand drifted toward his holster. The diner froze. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Logan stood slowly. "Don't." One word. Calm. Controlled. But carrying enough authority to cut through the tension. Outside, sirens screamed closer. 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 Then suddenly, the front door burst open. 3 patrol officers entered, weapons ready, scanning, confused, immediately followed by 2 sergeants, then more officers. The tiny diner transformed into a police scene in seconds, and every single person present looked toward Brendan, waiting for an explanation, waiting for direction, waiting for leadership. Instead, they received chaos. "He assaulted me," Brendan pointed at Ethan. Several officers immediately focused on him. Ethan slowly released Brendan's wrist. The room felt like a powder keg. One wrong move and everything exploded. Then Logan finally reached into his jacket. Several officers tensed. Hands moved toward weapons. Brendan nearly shouted, "Don't move," but Logan ignored him. Carefully, slowly, he removed a leather wallet, opened it, and displayed a gold shield. The effect was immediate, like someone had cut the power. The room went silent. One patrol officer blinked. Another leaned closer, then another. Nobody spoke. Logan's voice remained calm. Detective Logan Pierce, he pointed toward Ethan. Senior Detective Ethan Mercer. A pause, then the words that changed everything. Organized Crime Division. Brendan stared, confused, then concerned, then terrified. Logan wasn't finished. We are currently operating under federal authorization. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Ethan delivered the final blow. You just compromised Operation Ironclad. The color vanished from Brendan's face, because unlike the customers, unlike the patrol officers, unlike the waitress, he knew that name. Every officer in the department knew that name. Operation Ironclad wasn't supposed to be discussed, but everyone knew it existed. Rumors surrounded it, stories circulated about federal agencies, weapons trafficking, months of surveillance, millions in resources. And now, his stomach twisted. No, no, no. This couldn't be happening. Then another voice entered the diner, a voice filled with fury, pure fury. Somebody tell me this is a joke. Every head turned. Captain Daniel Mitchell stood in the doorway, and one look at his face told everyone exactly how serious the situation had become. Captain Daniel Mitchell looked like he was seconds away from exploding. The moment he entered the diner, every officer instinctively stepped aside. Nobody wanted to be standing between him and Brendan Fowler. Not now. Not after what had just happened. Mitchell's eyes moved from Brendan to Ethan, then to Logan, then to the patrol units filling the restaurant, then back to Brendan. His jaw tightened. What exactly happened here? Nobody answered immediately, because everyone already knew. The question wasn't really a question. It was an invitation, an opportunity for Brendan to explain himself before somebody else did. Unfortunately for Brendan, Ethan spoke first. Officer Fowler initiated contact. Mitchell nodded. Go on. He detained 2 undercover detectives. Another nod. Go on. He called the Code 3 response. Mitchell's face darkened. Go on. He physically grabbed a federal task force member. The room became completely silent. Brendan felt his pulse pounding. Every sentence sounded worse than the last, because every sentence was worse than the last. Mitchell looked directly at him. Tell me he's wrong. Brendan opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because Ethan wasn't wrong, not even slightly. The captain stared at him for several seconds, then slowly held out his hand. Badge. Brendan blinked. What? Your badge. The young officer felt the blood drain from his face. Captain, now. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room watched. Hands shaking, Brendan removed his badge. Mitchell took it, then extended his hand again. Weapon. A knot formed in Brendan's stomach. This couldn't be real. 10 minutes ago, he thought he was making a major arrest. Now his own captain was disarming him in front of half the department. Slowly, he surrendered his sidearm. Mitchell handed both items to a sergeant, then looked at Brendan one final time. If Operation Ironclad is compromised, the captain didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone understood, because nobody wanted to imagine the consequences. The consequences arrived 12 hours later. At 8:43 p.m., Brendan sat alone inside an internal affairs interview room. No badge, no gun, no patrol car, no confidence, only silence. The reality of the situation was finally beginning to settle in. 5 months. 5 months undercover. 5 months of federal work. All potentially destroyed because he couldn't walk away from a diner booth. The door opened. 3 people entered. Captain Mitchell, Detective Ethan Mercer, and a woman Brendan had never seen before. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, dark suit, federal credentials. She sat across from him, opened a folder, then introduced herself. Special Agent Rebecca Cole, FBI. Brendan's stomach dropped. This wasn't internal affairs anymore. This wasn't departmental discipline. This was federal territory. And federal territory was dangerous. Very dangerous. Agent Cole slid several documents across the table. Brendan glanced down, then immediately wished he hadn't. The words seemed impossible. Federal indictment. Obstruction of a federal investigation. Civil rights violations. Aggravated assault on a federal officer. His heart nearly stopped. No. The word escaped before he realized it. No, that's impossible. Cole remained expressionless. Nothing about this is impossible. I didn't know who they were. You didn't need to know. The answer landed like a hammer. You are expected to follow the law whether someone is undercover or not. Brendan said nothing, because she was right, and everyone in the room knew it. Then Agent Cole reached into the folder, removed a flash drive, and placed it on the table. There's one more thing. Minutes later, a speaker activated. Static filled the room. Then Brendan heard his own voice. His stomach twisted immediately. The audio came from Ethan's undercover wire. Every second inside the diner, every word, every order, every threat, every mistake, crystal clear. Show me your ID. Pause. What are you doing here? Pause. You don't ask questions, I ask questions. Brendan closed his eyes. It sounded even worse than he remembered. Then the recording continued, and somehow became worse, much worse. His voice, louder, angrier, more aggressive. Each minute revealed another mistake, another assumption, another abuse of authority. Nobody interrupted, nobody commented. The recording did all the work. 43 minutes later, the room was silent. Brendan stared at the table. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no defense, no misunderstanding, no missing context. Everything had been recorded. Everything. Agent Cole closed the laptop. We're done here. And for the first time, Brendan understood the truth. His career was over. Meanwhile, Operation Ironclad faced a different problem. Victor Kane had disappeared. No calls, no meetings, no messages, nothing. For nearly 3 weeks. The task force feared the worst. Maybe Derek Cole had warned him. Maybe the diner incident had exposed everything. Maybe 5 months of work had actually been destroyed. Then something unexpected happened. The media exploded. News stations covered Brendan Fowler's downfall non-stop. The story became national. A reckless rookie officer, a federal investigation, an abuse of power scandal. Public outrage grew daily, and slowly, the FBI realized something. The headlines created an opportunity. Because from Victor Kane's perspective, the story suggested something very specific. A local officer had acted alone. A local officer had made a mistake. A local officer had been punished. Nothing in the public narrative suggested an undercover operation remained active. Nothing suggested Ethan or Logan still had access. Nothing suggested the investigation continued. The scandal itself became camouflage, a smokescreen, exactly what the FBI needed. 4 weeks later, Ethan's burner phone rang. The number immediately caught his attention. Unknown, untraceable, the kind Victor Kane used. Ethan answered carefully. Silence. Then a familiar voice. Victor. I hear your little diner problem is over. Ethan kept his breathing steady. It wasn't our problem. A pause, then laughter. Short, cold. I suppose not. The line remained quiet. Then Victor finally said the words everyone had been waiting for. We're ready to continue. Ethan looked toward Logan. Neither man smiled, but both understood. The operation was alive. 3 nights later, rain hammered an abandoned rail yard outside the city. Rust-covered train cars sat beneath broken floodlights. Dozens of shipping containers formed narrow corridors between the tracks. The location felt abandoned. It wasn't. More than 40 federal agents were hidden across the property. SWAT teams waited inside warehouses. Snipers watched from elevated positions. Helicopters remained on standby. Everyone waited for one thing: the signal. At 11:07 p.m., Victor Kane arrived. 3 SUVs, 8 armed men. Enough firepower to start a small war. Ethan and Logan met them near the center of the yard. The transaction began. Money, weapons, verification, exactly as planned. Then Victor extended his hand. The final moment, the final step, the final confirmation. Ethan shook it and spoke a single word: checkmate. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the night exploded. Floodlights ignited. Flashbangs detonated. Commands echoed through the darkness. "Federal agents, drop your weapons! Get on the ground!" SWAT teams poured from every direction. Victor's men froze. Some tried running. Others reached for weapons. None escaped. Within 90 seconds, the entire organization was in custody. 5 years of investigations. 5 months undercover. Hundreds of agents. Thousands of hours. Finished. Just like that. Operation Ironclad was over. 9 months later, Brendan Fowler stood in federal court. No uniform, no badge, no authority. Only a defendant waiting for sentencing. Judge William Harrison reviewed the file before him. The courtroom remained silent. Then he looked directly at Brendan. "You were entrusted with extraordinary authority." Brendan lowered his eyes. The judge continued. "Authority that exists to protect citizens." Another pause. "Instead, you used it to intimidate, escalate, and interfere with lawful federal operations." Every word felt heavier than the last. "You mistook power for judgment." The courtroom remained perfectly still. Judge Harrison lifted the sentencing order. "This court sentences you to 144 months in federal custody. 12 years. The gavel struck. Brendan closed his eyes. His future disappeared with that sound. Several weeks later, Captain Mitchell stood before a packed press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters filled the room. Beside him stood Ethan Mercer and Logan Pierce. The 2 detectives looked uncomfortable with the attention, as always. Mitchell smiled. For 5 months, these detectives risked their lives every day. The room listened. They remained disciplined under extraordinary pressure. Another pause. They showed professionalism even when confronted by one of our own. The captain handed each detective a commendation. Applause filled the room. Long, loud, earned. For a moment, Ethan remembered the diner, the confrontation, the ruined morning, the fear that everything had been lost. Now it felt like a lifetime ago. As reporters continued asking questions, Ethan looked toward Logan. Logan smirked. "Next operation?" Ethan laughed quietly. "Let's just hope nobody calls Code 3. For the first time in months, both detectives allowed themselves to relax. Operation Ironclad was over. Victor Kane was behind bars. Justice had won. And the rookie who thought he knew everything had learned the most expensive lesson of his life. The end.